Senator from Alabama,
Madam President, I ask for unanimous consent to suspend the quorum call.
without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I rise today because I am deeply concerned about what is happening across the country to our farmers as a result of the President's trade war with China. Let me first say that I agree with the President 100% that we need fair trade deals, and we have to make sure that American workers and consumers are not being taken for a ride by other countries, especially rogue countries and bad actors like China. But since this trade war began last year, these tariffs are having the complete opposite effect on the people that they are supposed to help. That's because tariffs are taxes, plain and simple. Tariffs are taxes, and they're being raised every day by the administration. The President insists that tariffs force China to pay money to the U.S. Treasury, which just is not true. It is just not factually accurate at all and is misleading to the American people. When a tariff is placed on a Chinese good, it's the American company importing that product, or in addition to the American consumer who ultimately buys it, that pays that additional price. It's just like adding a sales tax to any consumer good, any commodity in which a tariff has been levied. From businesses to farmers to consumers, these taxes are being paid for by Americans. That's not politics, that is economics. The President thinks that these tariffs will somehow punish China for their bad behavior. But it's our people who are suffering right now. Last week, we saw a report that showed that the cost of these tariffs have fallen entirely on the United States businesses and United States households. Just yesterday, China announced that it is planning on retaliating once again with increased tariffs on $60 billion worth of American-made goods, which sent the stock market into a tailspin. But when unemployment is incredibly low, like it is today, the economy is doing well, like it is today. But you know, across the country, there are so many people who don't always feel the effects of that booming economy. Yeah, they've got jobs, but they also have families, and they have health care costs. They have other costs. So they don't always feel that the economy is doing as well for them as it is for others that they see on the news and in TV and in Washington, D.C. Working folks aren't going to feel the true benefits of this economic growth and the tax cuts from 2017 if they're paying higher taxes on the products that they buy every single day. The President said just yesterday, quote, our government, he's talking about the tariffs, and he's talking about feeling a little bit of pain, but how great a deal this is going to be. Our government will be happy. Our government will be happy because we're taking in tens of billions of dollars. But that money is being brought into the Treasury on the backs of working people, hard-working American taxpayers. It's not the Chinese companies. It's not the Chinese people. It's not the Mexican people. It's not the Canadian people. It's the American public who is paying that money into the United States Treasury. Tariffs are taxes, and we're all going to pay because of this trade war. Call them whatever you want, but that's the effect that they're going to have on the wallets of American taxpayers. Even the President's own economic advisors admitted this week that it's Americans who will suffer as a result of this trade war and the increased taxes being placed on them every day in the consumer goods that they are purchasing. In Alabama, our farmers in particular are hurting, and that's an understatement. Tariffs are affecting a cross-section of our manufacturing workforce. It's got our automobile dealers concerned because of the threat of foreign automobile tariffs. But even in the best of times, it's the farmers who are at most risk. Farming is a risky business, and their margins are very tight. Many farmers in Alabama have already suffered devastating losses from natural disasters like Hurricane Michael. And quite frankly, they are suffering another congressional disaster right now. That's the words of my colleague and friend, Senator Isaacson from Georgia, because we can't put politics aside quick enough to get disaster aid to farmers in the South, to folks who have suffered from flooding, from folks who have suffered from wildfires. We can't do this because of politics. So now they're suffering. The farmers that I visited back in South Alabama after Hurricane Michael are suffering now the congressional disaster. The last thing in the world they need is another administration disaster that is being manufactured because of the Chinese tariffs on their crops. Soybeans in particular are being hit. Soybean farming supports more than 11,000 jobs in Alabama. But soybean prices are at their lowest that they have been in a decade. You can see from this chart how they started up. It's been over $10 just in April of 2018. Over $10, and now it is just above $8. And they're continuing to slide. And the longer this goes on, the more it hurts. Cotton farmers have been hit. Cotton has had almost a 25% reduction in the market price since these tariffs took effect. We have record low unemployment in the country right now, yet we have a growing number of bankruptcies in farm country. I was looking at reports just today that talks about the rise of the number of bankruptcies. The point being that these are hitting people now. We all want a great deal. We all want to make sure that the president gets a good deal for the American public, the American consumer, but this is hurting people right now, and they will not be able to recover if this is not ended soon, unless the president can reach a deal soon. Soon, we can expect prices to continue to deteriorate and the economic conditions in farm country to get even worse, putting in jeopardy generations of farmers who may get run out of business. You know, this is a dire situation. I'm not trying to just light a fire somewhere. This is really serious for those folks. You only have to watch the news every day. These are people that have supported the President of the United States. They voted for the President of the United States. They want a good deal. They want a fair deal. But this has been going on a long time. And it doesn't seem to be that there's any end in sight. Many of my state's farmers, probably most of my state's farmers, support the president, as do others around the country. They've had his back over the last 2 or 3 years, even during the campaign. But in return, these trade policies have taken money out of their pockets. They believed when this first started over a year ago, they believed that they would get a good deal soon. They believed that they could get crops in the field, that they could get their loans paid, that they could recover from the disasters that had hit them. But it's just dragged on, and every time we see a new round of tweets or a new press conference, we talk about what a great deal this is going to be, but yet when you look behind the curtain, everything is different. And the trade war goes on and on and on. I fear that he's not listening to these farmers or to the members of Congress on both sides of the aisle, like our finance chairman, who are telling him that these policies are hurting farmers. They're devastating farmers. I'm not sure how much longer they can hang on in this trade war. Many will. Many can hang on, but others cannot. Others cannot. And whether or not the next generation of farmers will take it and take up the mantle of farming remains to be seen. It's one reason why I'm introducing a bill today to update the Trade Adjustment Assistance Program, which was for farmers, was originally created by my colleague, Senator Chuck Grassley, Republican from Iowa, to provide help for farmers and producers who have been hurt by these retaliatory tariffs. TAA was originally created to help provide assistance to workers who were impacted by trade, updated in 2002 to include assistance to growers, producers, and fishermen. This bill that I introduced today, and a companion has been introduced in the House, would update the program once again to help folks who are hurting because of trade actions carried out by our government, not another, by our government. But look, the fact of the matter is that no matter how many legislative stopgaps my colleagues and I propose, or bailouts the president offers, the massive losses that farmers and producers are suffering are not going to end until the president calls off this trade war. We all want better trade deals. Farmers want access to global markets. China has, without a doubt, been a bad actor on many trade issues, a rogue country on trade issues. But we should be working with our allies in Europe and elsewhere to hold China accountable. Instead, the administration has decided to go it alone. We're picking our fights with friends over our own trade issues with them, rather than working through diplomacy to try to work those deals. We're picking fights with them, and we're going it alone against China when we so desperately need our friends to help us. China is a growing concern around the world, and we need global partners to help us in our trade issues to try to make sure the global economy stays stable. I would be absolutely thrilled if the President of the United States could negotiate a great deal. I hope he negotiates the best deal ever that he says that he's going to do. I hope and pray that we get that great deal and that we can do a trade deal with China that is fairer and better for America than it's ever been in the history of this country. I hope for all of our sakes that happens. I really do. This is not a partisan issue. This is something about where we are as a country. And I hope for the best for him. But right now, these tariffs are having the opposite effect, and it's hurting so many people. What many of us fear in the cynical world that we live in today, and we all get caught up in, including people and members of this body, what we fear is going to happen is that when the president finally wakes up and realizes that he has done irreparable harm and irreparable damage to so many of his own supporters with these tariffs, when he wakes up as he approaches 2020 and understands that his support may be eroding among those that form the core backbone of his support, that he will scramble to make a deal, regardless of whether or not it's a good deal or not, but a deal nonetheless. And regardless of whether or not America comes out on top, when all is said and done, we can claim victory, but it may be a very hollow victory. Because going forward, we may have a little bit better deal. We may have a much better deal. But it's not going to change what's happening today, what's happened over the last of the year. Even if a deal is struck, we have already lost. Farmers will still have to be digging themselves out of this financial hole for a very long time. Many will have to declare bankruptcy and lose their farms because they couldn't wait out the president's trade gamble and his tough talk. To mitigate the tariffs' harmful impacts, the administration is providing some aid to help farmers who are struggling as a result of the trade war. They did so last year, and they need it. But those government bailouts, and that's what they are, their bailouts are being paid by other American taxpayers in order to alleviate the pain inflicted by the administration's policies. That's right, working families across the country are being asked to step up. You know, when we do those things, we're charitable people. If somebody's in pain, we want to do that and help. But when that pain is being caused by the very person that is causing us to then step up, that makes no sense. Folks, these handouts won't come close to making up for the loss that these farmers have suffered and assuring our long-term solution for a healthy trade market. The biggest problem, if these farmers, they don't want handouts. They don't want government subsidies. They don't want handouts to them for the problems that they're being faced by these trade policies. They want their markets. They want to be able to go to China. They want to be able to go to places around the world and sell their products. They're proud of their products. We should be proud of those products. We should not be just simply telling farmers, do not worry because we will pay for you to grow your product. We're not worried about your markets because we'll buy your soybeans. We'll buy the cotton. We'll buy those things if China doesn't do it. That's not what these farmers want. They don't want that charity. They want their markets. They work hard for those markets. So how much more can our farmers take? How much more? How long can they go on like this? At what point will they be forced to cut their losses and find another way to support their families while we negotiate with China, while we tweet the fact that a good deal is coming? At what point will those in Congress who ignore the math, what point with members of this body in the House of Representatives who ignore the math and the suffering of their constituents, at what point by those in this body and the House of Representatives who ignore the suffering of their constituents by supporting these harmful trade policies, at what point do they stand up? And by supporting, there's so many people that I've talked to that do not support these trade policies, but yet they are silent. And they say, give the president time. He's going to get a good deal. But what point does it come where they recognize the suffering of the farmers of the United States and my state of Alabama? At what point do they finally stand up and say, enough is enough? You know, Mr. President, we, over the years, have ceded a lot of control. The Congress of the United States has ceded a lot of authority to the executive branch of government. And now it's coming home to roost. We can't do much of anything except give speeches like this. We can try to introduce bills that probably will never get to the Senate floor. We can go home and listen to the pain, listen to the suffering, listen to people who so badly want to support the president in what he's doing, as all of us do for these new trade deals. But the fact of the matter is, we have ceded so much power to the executive branch of government. It's time for Congress to stand up. It's time for people to speak out, to help their farmers, to let the administration know that this cannot go on much longer. We've got to stand up and stop this pain as quickly as we can. We can do it. The president can do it. He's got smart people surrounding him. They need to explain to him again that these tariffs are being paid by the American people, not another country. And let's get this negotiated, and let's stop the bleeding for the American farmer as soon as we possibly can. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor.